Hi, welcome back to Truth Fairy Tidbits. I am the Truth Fairy, and I am here to give you tidbits of factual information in the hopes that it will help to deprogram more people. What I mean by that, if you are still of the mindset of statism, that you believe in government and that that's necessary and all the things government does, you are a statist and you are still programmed. And what I'm doing here is reading from some of the sources that helped me to break out of that program, because I used to be just like you. And when you try to share information with people who are just like you, and you try to hand them a whole book to read, or even an article for the most part, they're not going to look at it, because your ingrained response is to defend your belief system. I used to be the same way, totally understand. But then somehow, I don't know if I got offended enough, curious enough, not sure what happened, but somehow my brain wanted to understand some of these concepts that I had heard. Now, maybe you've never heard of these concepts before, that government is illegitimate and immoral and we don't need it. And that's fair enough. Stick around, go back to the beginning of my videos, start from there, and maybe this will make more sense. But for more than likely, most of you who still believe in government, and among other program beliefs that we'll get into eventually, you have heard such a thing as government is illegitimate. And you most likely think that what we mean by that is the current red team or blue team of government. And you want to argue which team is better. So that's not what this is. There are no teams, there are no sides. There is government and there is freedom. You can't have both, okay? And that's what I'm trying to explain here. So if you haven't heard these before, and you are still, heard these concepts before, and you are still of that mindset, you're probably going to be offended, and that's okay, because that's naturally what happens when your beliefs get challenged. If you are intellectually honest with yourself and you stop and actually ponder this information that I'm trying to share, and don't just get mad at the one delivering the information and whatever, you don't like my face or my voice or whatever, wherever the information is coming from, so you disregard it altogether. If you don't do that and you actually use your brain, this will start to make sense. And it means that you're gonna have to give up what you currently believed and admit that what you currently believe or used to believe might not be true, or the best way to to think about things. And that's a hard thing to do, and I understand that. I had to go through it. It's not a comfortable process, but trust me, it is better on this side. Okay, so that being said, I will throw it out there again. If this is the first video that you're watching on my channel, it's probably not going to make any sense, and I might say things that don't exactly correlate to what I'm reading today, but it correlates to something I've probably already said. So if you're just going to make a comment that I'm not making sense, or that whatever, it's because you're not looking at all the information from the start. So my videos are not very long. If you want to get caught up and see where we are, please do that. Otherwise, keep your comments to yourself, or whatever, make stupid comments. I don't care. Like I said in the beginning of my videos, my introduction, you're not going to hurt my feelings. So if you want to just ramble some bullshit and not have anything, intelligent to say, that's fine too. I don't care. It's quite amusing, actually. So go for it. Anyways, picking up where we left off in this book, Most Dangerous Superstition by Larkin Rose. Okay, so getting into the myth of consent. Now, if you've been here through the videos, I've already covered this extensively in this book, No Treason. This is the first book that we went through. Highly recommend you go back and pay attention to that. Extensively covered consent, and that consent of the governed, and that our government rests on consent, and Constitution rests on consent, and all that is complete bullshit, because it doesn't. So Larkin's going to get into it here, and here we go. In the modern world, slavery is almost universally condemned, but the relationship of perceived authority is very much the relationship of a slave master to a slave. Not wanting to admit Not wanting to admit that and not wanting to condone what amounts to slavery, those who believe in authority memorize and repeat blatantly inaccurate rhetoric designed to hide the true nature of the situation. One example is this phrase, consent of the governed. There are two basic ways in which people can interact, by mutual agreement or by one person using threats or violence to force his will upon another. The first can be labeled consent, both sides willingly and voluntarily agreeing to what is to be done. The second can be labeled governing, one person controlling another. Since these two, consent and governing, are opposites, the consent of the governed is a contradiction. If there is mutual consent, it is not government. If there is government, there is no consent. Some will claim that a majority or the people as a whole have given their consent to be ruled, even if many individuals have not. But such an argument turns the concept of consent on its head. No one individually or as a group can give consent for something to be done to someone else. That is simply not what consent means. It defies logic to say, I give my consent for you to be robbed. Yet that is the basis of the cult of democracy, the notion that majority can give consent on behalf of a minority. That is not consent of the governed, that is forcible control of the governed with the consent of a third party. In reality, no one ever agrees to let those in government do whatever they want. So in order to fabricate consent, where there is none, believers in authority add another even more bizarre step to the mythology, the notion of implied consent. The claim is that by merely living in a town or a state or a country, one is agreeing to abide by whatever rules happen to be issued by the people who claim to have the right to rule that town, state, or country. The idea is that if someone doesn't like the rules, he is free to leave that town, state, or country altogether, and if he chooses not to leave, that constitutes giving his consent to be controlled by the rulers of that jurisdiction. Again, basically, coercion is not consent, okay? You don't consent to pay taxes. You're coerced and extorted to pay taxes. You don't consent to be governed because the only other option they give you is to go to a different country. You see how fucking retarded that is? Okay, here come my dogs. Let's see how this goes. Though it is constantly parroted as gospel, the idea defies common sense. It makes no more sense than a carjacker stopping a driver on a Sunday and telling him, by driving a car in this neighborhood on Sunday, you're agreeing to give me your car. One person obviously cannot decide what counts as someone else's agreeing to something. An agreement is when two or more people communicate a mutual willingness to enter into some arrangement. Simply being born somewhere is not agreeing to anything. It is one thing for someone to say, if you want to ride in my car, you may not smoke. Or if you want to come into my house, you have to take off your shoes. It's quite another to try to tell people that what they can and cannot do on their own property. Whoever has the right to make the rules for a particular place is by definition the owner of that place. That is the basis of the idea of private property, that there can be an owner who has the exclusive right to decide what is done with and on that property. The owner of a house has the right to keep others out of it, and by extension, the right to tell visitors what they can and cannot do so long as they are in the house. And that sheds some light on the underlying assumption behind the idea of implied consent. To tell someone that his only valid choices are either to leave the country or to abide by whatever commands the politicians issue logically implies that everything in the country is the property of the politicians. If a person can spend year after year paying for his home or even building it himself, and his choices are still to either obey the politicians or get out, that means that his house and the time and effort he invested in that house are the property of the politicians. And for a person's time and effort to rightfully belong to another is the definition of slavery. That is exactly what implied consent theory means, that every country is a huge slave plantation and that everything and everyone there is the property of the politicians. And of course, a master does not need the consent of his slave. There's also a practical problem with the obey or get out attitude, which is that getting out would only relocate the individual to some other giant slave plantation in a different country. The end result is that everyone on earth is a slave, the only choice being which master to live under. This completely rules out actual freedom, and more to the point, it is not what consent means. Okay, stop right there for today. So, again, if you've been here long enough through these videos, you should understand by now what consent is and what it is not. Okay, you cannot consent on behalf of somebody else, like he said. So the majority rule thing, the majority of people think that they want government and keep voting for it and keep participating in it. In no way does that mean you can consent on my behalf. Each individual person would need to consent to be governed if that's what they want. And then on top of that, which we've went extensively through in the last book as well, if you want that, it should only apply to you. I don't consent to it. I don't consent to be governed. I don't need to be led. I don't need a group of people stealing my money and telling me what I can do with my life. If that's what you want, that's cool, but it shouldn't apply to me. So the implied consent is a bunch of garbage. It's another programmed response that people just parrot because that's just what we're told our whole life. If you live here, you consent to be ruled. You consent to all the nasty things that government does, including stealing our money. So I think I'm just going to keep it short and sweet today and let that be it. And again, if you have anything intelligent to say and want to leave a comment, or you have a genuine question about something that I'm reading or saying, go ahead and leave a comment. If you watched 2 minutes of this video and decided that you didn't like what I was saying and you're just going to say some stupid shit, I mean, whatever, that's fine too, but you're probably going to get a stupid answer back from me, and then you're going to disappear because you don't like being called out for having a stupid comment. So that's fine too. It's all fun for me. So yeah, there we go. Happy Friday, and as always, do not comply. Bye.